Welcome to the SaaS Builder Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wooton. Today, we're going to discuss the top success plays for SaaS CEOs. Joining me is the CEO of Success Coach, Glenn Gow, a seasoned CEO, investor, and advisor with a career spanning 25 years as CEO and 5 years as a venture capitalist. Glenn, who holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, is an expert in AI, leadership, and strategic decision-making, drawing from his extensive experience guiding executives and helping businesses succeed. Today, Glenn helps CEOs make confident decisions, leveraging decades of experience to anticipate challenges and avoid costly mistakes. I'm so glad we're chatting, Glenn. And we're going to start today's conversation by answering the question, how can I lead my SaaS team to success? Glenn Gow, welcome to the SaaS Builder Podcast.
Thank you, Randy. Very excited to be here.
Glenn, as we talk about, you have such great experience, 25 years experience, seasoned CEO, investor, advisor, just awesome. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about was really for our audience who are early stage founder CEOs of how do they think about leadership and how do they build teams to be successful? And so could we start with just the broader question of when you meet with people, what is the current state of leadership in SaaS organizations and what trends or challenges are leaders managing, wrestling with today?
The current state is CEOs are not always focused on scaling. They're thinking about the next quarter, they're thinking about the next board meeting, they're thinking about the next deal, and they're correctly, most of the time, rolling up their sleeves to get the work done. However, when they step back and really ask themselves, can I scale what I've created? The answer is no, because they are very involved in things. It could be, I have a CEO who's the biggest contributor to the code base in his organization, and he knows that is not sustainable. That's not scalable. I have another CEO that carries the biggest quota in the company, and she realizes that's not sustainable. So it's all about scaling. Now, when I was in venture capital, I learned a very interesting statistic, which is that over a 5-year period, roughly 60% of CEOs are fired. So I asked myself, why is that? Now, the ultimate reason is they're not growing the company fast enough. But if we peel the onion a little bit, we look at what's happening in the life of the CEO and ask, why are they not growing the company fast enough? The answer is they were the perfect CEO at the time the investors put money in. They're exactly the right person at the exact right time. But at every inflection point of growth, the CEO needs to grow. They're going to take on a new set of responsibilities, and they need to change who they are as a CEO in order to be successful. This is what scaling is all about. So I talk to CEOs about how they scale themselves so they can scale the company.
I'm offering a complimentary coaching session to CEOs. If you're accepted, you'll receive a one-on-one coaching session with me at absolutely no cost or obligation. Due to my current commitments, I'm only able to accept a modest number of requests for coaching. During the coaching session, we'll immediately go to work and address your highest priority challenges. You will walk away with ways to begin solving your biggest problems. And you'll get a sense for whether or not we're a fit for each other. To see if you qualify for this coaching session, visit the website currently showing on your screen, or click the link in the description below. Thank you.
And so, Glenn, a couple of things, just technically, when you think of scale, everyone talks about scale and startup versus scale up. Can you help define what you mean by scale? Because it can be like, I don't know what that means, but I know how to build product or I know how to go out and sell customers, but what does it mean to scale?
So what it means to scale is how do I build something that can grow rapidly without my involvement?
Got it. So it's removing yourself from whichever, just being the single point of failure or the bottleneck for all decisions, and instead being able to create a team, a system, really a broader system with a set of processes to be able to support the growth of the company in terms of number of people or number of customers.
That's very well said. What I tell CEOs is your number one job is to build a great leadership team. If you can build a great leadership team, you can pivot. You can change what you need to change in order to grow. You can rely on people. You can delegate to people. You can find a way to spend time on the more strategic issues or the more important issues if you have a great team supporting you.
So let's talk about that, Glenn, because you also called out this point I thought super interesting is you have to understand when you've hit an inflection point, and as a CEO, be self-aware enough to say, okay, this is another one of these inflection points and I need to grow from here. If we think about what are the steps, the inflection points that you see that trigger the different types of hires? So when do you hire your first salesperson? When do you hire your first marketing person? When do you hire that finance person? Because I think it's different based on your inflection point. So maybe walk us through those stair steps.
So I'll use some examples. If we're the type of company that sells large SaaS to large companies, let's say, the first lighthouse account all of a sudden opens up a whole set of questions about how can we duplicate what we just did? Can we actually continue to support this lighthouse account? What kind of organization is it going to take to do that? And what are we learning through this first implementation? That often brings up a lot of questions about how do I build a sales organization now? Do I need revenue ops to come in? Do I have to change my customer success organization because they're just getting off the ground? That's one inflection point. Or a huge inflection point is around. So whether it's going from pre-seed to seed or seed to A, all of a sudden we have a whole new set of budgets in front of us, a whole new set of opportunities to grow. Now the question is, how are we going to allocate those dollars in order to grow? Where is that money going to go? So the CEO shifts from maybe being the smartest person in the room to being somebody who has to realize, and this happened to me when I was a CEO. I remember sitting in a meeting with my team, and I said, oh my God, every single person in this room is smarter than I am at the thing that they're good at. And for a second, Randy, I felt, I don't know, diminished or something.
Yeah.
I said, wait a minute. That's actually my job, is to have a team of people who are smarter than I am. So I did the right thing. But when you do that, all of a sudden you're no longer relied upon to write the best code or to close the biggest deal. You're relied upon to manage this team. And a lot of CEOs have trouble making that transition.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And so the first couple inflection points is one is a CEO, a technical founder, needs to get the first couple of products or sales and be able to sell the product. You don't have full product market fit, but you are able to prove to investors and others that you have something other than what your friends and family are going to buy.
That's right.
And that first decision about what type of sales leader do you bring in? You don't want someone who's just knows how to run sales organizations. It's more like a business development sales leader, someone who can go out and get big accounts, help define the use cases, the requirements to help inform the product roadmap.
Let me add on to that. Notice I said your first and most important job is to build a great leadership team. What I mean by that is you're building, notice I said a leadership team, meaning those hires have to know how to scale themselves. They know how. So I'm not going to bring in a great salesperson as my head of sales. I'm going to bring in somebody who knows how to grow an organization from 0 to 10 million or whatever my target is.
That was the other thing I was going to say is I think who the right person is depends on where you are. So the seller, I have a couple of friends that I work with out in the Valley that are early stage sales leaders. And what they like to do is take it from 0 to 10, but they're not the guy who's going to take it from 50 to 100.
That's
right.
So
I think that's another insight for CEOs, especially if they're working with VCs, is to get super clear about what are the capabilities you need for this next stage and the knock-on stage. Because you're probably not going to be able to afford the person that's a $100 million sales leader either.
Probably not at that moment. But this is another inflection point. When I get to a certain level of revenue as a CEO, I have to realize, guess what? I have to start investing in things that, frankly, are not all that interesting, like process and workflow and systems. And no CEO wants to spend time on those things. And yet it's like building a house, right? We have to build the infrastructure as we go. And if we don't have a solid foundation and a solid first floor, we're not going to be able to continue to grow that company. And so there's a shift from, I'm going to focus on trying to close the biggest deals or whatever focus they may have to, no, I'm going to make sure I have a team that can grow and build an infrastructure under them so that they can grow without my oversight.
Got it. So the number one thing you say is you got to scale. And as part of that, you got to be able to hire a good team. Maybe you could spend a couple of minutes talking about how do you know if you're being successful in leading this team? You have good ideas. You've never done it before. You're hiring people that have done it before, that are more seasoned, more experienced. You're in this imposter syndrome. How do you know? How do you set up a system to give you the feedback as that CEO to tell you if you're being successful in leading that team you've brought on board now?
I love management frameworks. And my favorite management framework is OKRs. And these are hard to do, Randy. Not everybody does them well, and most CEOs tweak them to make them work for themselves. But when you do them correctly, this becomes a foundational tool that enables you to not only evaluate each individual as to how well they're doing in the organization, but evaluate yourself as to whether or not you're being extraordinarily clear about what you want them to accomplish, if you're giving them the resources they need to get things done, whether or not they're collaborating with each other to get things done. And as a CEO, you're now looking at this group, this leadership team you've created, and asking yourself, am I getting the most out of each person in a way that we're much better working together as a team than we are working individually?
And so let's make it real for our audience. What does that look like? So lots of us have heard about OKRs or MBOs or KPIs, lots of acronyms there. There's systems out there. For example, Entrepreneurs Organization has a system called EOS.
Sure.
There's a great guy I know, Joel Trammell, who has his CEO operating system, which is a great book. So there are lots of ways you could do it, but how do you make it real? What are the key behaviors or habits you have to build as an executive team to be high functioning?
I like your point about there are many frameworks, because ultimately I don't care what framework you choose as long as you choose one. So there are a few key factors. One, there's a quarterly planning process. We're going to look every quarter at what do we want to accomplish in the next quarter. Two, we're going to become extraordinarily clear about the things we're going to focus on, and, Randy, the things we're not. We're going to take things off the priority list. This is a painful exercise to say, we're actually not going to do something that we feel is important. It just isn't important enough in the moment. Okay. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to get people to sign up to do this work. This becomes a very personal conversation between the CEO and their direct report saying, oh, look, I'm asking you to do something big here. It's a stretch. Are you ready to take this on? This is a magic moment. This is where you really are trying to understand, do I have the right people on my team? And can I manage them to do things that they might not have been able to do on their own? The next is this process of committing to something that to be done within the quarter has to be revisited weekly. I've seen over and over again, this becomes a quarterly exercise, and then we forget exactly what we're focused on. At the end of the quarter, surprise, we haven't achieved what we were hoping to achieve. But no, this needs to be at the top of the one-on-one agenda. What is the status of the progress we're making against our plan to achieve this thing within the 90-day period? Now we're starting to see human behavior change, which is what I call the hardest thing for management, is to create human behavior change. All of a sudden people realize, wow, Randy's the CEO, he's serious about this. I have to report every single week how I'm doing. I better be prepared, because that's the only thing he's asking me about. Why? Because we determined that was the most important thing at the beginning of the quarter. But it requires weekly discussions on this. Otherwise, people just don't take it seriously.
So, Glenn, what I'm hearing you say is just that there's this combination of different altitudes. The first important altitude is to chart the course for 90 days. And part of that is because if you're doing it more than that, you don't have time to execute. But if you've set the 90-day plan, that's reasonable for executives to think about. These are the initiatives we need to accomplish, or the articulation in the OKR framework, the objectives that you need to achieve. The second thing I think you were pointing to implicitly was you got to have some metrics. You got to have some metrics that you're tracking, either leading or lagging, that are going to indicate whether or not you're making traction on that initiative. So number of website visitors, number of repeat website visitors, something along those lines.
Exactly right.
You do that collectively as an executive team. So you have a corporate set of objectives. And then for each executive, they need to sign up. And they need to have their own objectives that they've identified, their own metrics that they're going to be reporting on. And it's through the weekly one-on-ones that you're helping them. You're not just putting their feet to the fire. You're asking them to come to you and say, hey, how are you progressing on your priorities that we agreed were your priorities in line with the overall corporate objective?
That's right. Exactly right. And you do this in your weekly leadership team meeting, and you do it in all hands meetings, and you let everybody know what's going on. Part of the reason you do this is you want people to help solve the problem that others are facing. So we want to make sure we're not working in silos. Oh, marketing is just trying to get X number of website visitors. If they're not able to, the question is who else might be able to contribute to that? So one of the things I recommend to CEOs is, even though each person has a set of key results they're pursuing, the CEO also put over the top of all this and I've had a CEO say, this is how I'm going to do it, I'm going to watch for collaboration. I insist on collaboration, and that's going to be part of the way I evaluate you as an executive as to whether or not are you just heads down doing your own thing? Or are you helping the team?
Yeah, I think that's one of those really great distinctions is it's not just about the what, it's about the how. And I think it's really important you articulate the what with the objectives, like these are the business results we want to achieve. And look, the cool thing about being in SaaS startup is no one knows what they're doing. We're all trying to figure it out, but you get better at estimating your ability to deliver and your confidence in the quality of the work through this cycle of this quarterly planning. The other piece, I think, you got to be super deliberate about your leadership values. At Maxio, where I've done this at other companies as well, we have a great leadership framework, and it's all about the way you interact with people and how you show up. And so year-end evaluations are both what did you accomplish, but as leaders, I find it's even more about how you accomplish those. Is that something?
That's right. So you inject into this your cultural values. So I'll give you an example of a negative culture scenario. One of my CEOs said, hey, Glenn, everything was green in the weekly one-on-one. They would report red, yellow, green against their objectives or their key results in this case. And he said everything was green until the last 2 weeks of the quarter. And suddenly it looked like a Christmas tree all lit up with yellow and red. Now, what we recognize is that he had a culture where people were afraid to give him bad news.
Yeah.
And so he was surprised. And we agreed, okay, we have to address that cultural issue. We need people to understand that it's better to bring up a problem early so it can be addressed because, frankly, he's not going to accept things changing at the end of the quarter again.
Yeah. I think sometimes I call that the watermelon metric. It's green on the outside, but red on the inside. And I think having monthly metrics that you're looking at that are trending and being specific, looking for leading indicators, like what are the things that are going to help inform you might be going on or off track is incredible. As we wrap this section, Glenn, I had one other question for you. So you can't do a podcast without talking about AI. So
sure.
How do you see modern tech like AI and machine learning enhancing how SaaS teams are built and empowered? So what's the latest and greatest that you're seeing in the industry right now?
I'll share some best practices that I hear from my CEOs and that I use myself. But the most impactful one was a CEO got up at an all-hands meeting and said, over the next 3 weeks, I need every single person in the company to use AI. I don't care what tool you choose. I don't care what AI it is. I just insist that you work on your job, using AI. Then, at the end of this 3-week period, I want you to report to your manager, what did you learn? You're going to learn that AI works well in some areas, that it doesn't work so well in other areas. You're going to learn that AI makes certain kinds of mistakes. And the question is, can we live with that or not? We're going to learn new processes. And so the idea that this CEO put forth is, every single one of us is going to be impacted by AI, hopefully in a positive way in our jobs. We need to begin learning that. And I'm not here as the CEO to teach you how to use AI. I need you to discover what is possible to use an AI. And we know that our competitors are using AI, so we're not going to be left behind. So there was a mandate. And then, oh, by the way, at the end, after you report back what we've learned, we're going to have people stand up in all hands meetings and report to everybody what they learned about writing a blog post or doing financial forecasting or ideating in strategy or whatever it is you used AI for, so that everybody gets a sense for where is it powerful, where is it weak.
That's great. I think you're basically saying at the highest level, AI is changing the way we all work.
Absolutely.
So to inculcate that into the culture in this phase of experimentation and having people encouraged to use it and explore it, we're all going to have augmented intelligence as just part of our go forward. I know when I write my view from 30,000 feet, I run it through ChatGPT. When we do blog posts, we run it through ChatGPT. It's just been incredibly helpful. Have you found anything, though, AI-wise, to help with those challenges in running an executive team, like making decisions, helping to prioritize? Is there generative AI technologies that are enhancing that capability that you've discovered so far?
I want to tell you a story about what one of my CEOs did. He said, look, I'm trying to make some culture change happen. And I have a CTO on my team that's resistant to this culture change. So he sat down with, I don't know if it was ChatGPT or Claude, but he sat down and he gave it a very detailed prompt about what he's trying to accomplish in the area of culture change. And he said, I'm having trouble with this particular executive. And then, this is the secret, he said, this person is an INTJ. So if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs,
Of course.
an evaluation of a different personality type, and he gave the personality type to ChatGPT, and he said what came back was just brilliant. And
Oh my gosh.
he used it while he was on Slack with the CTO and used the language that ChatGPT gave him to speak to an INTJ who was resistant to change. He said it was so amazing. We bonded like brothers.
Oh, that's brilliant. Every company I go to, we roll out some form of DISC, Myers-Briggs. I'm a big fan of Insights right now. Everyone in our company takes it, in part to build better understanding of how they like to be communicated with, how they like to be managed. And I tell everyone to read the darn documents. I give them mine. They maybe read it once and they put it on the bookshelf. That is a brilliant use case for AI, is load up the person's personality profile and tell the challenge. I'm gonna try that today, Glenn. That's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it.